the question that Iris had about the solar versus roof mount, one of the big problems that we have with NEC 2014, which are the electrical requirements, right, is you have to have what they call rapid shutdown. Rapid shutdown significantly increases the cost of a solar install. Because what it means is, in the event that something goes wrong on your roof, they have the fire department, whatever, has the ability within seconds to shut down each panel individually. And normally what happens is when the sun hits a panel, it's full blown power. I mean, there's just nothing you can do to stop it. It's going to, burn up the roof. So that's what rapid shutdown means. There are two ways around that in a roof mount. Is one, if you have your inverter within 5 feet of your array inside the house, which means you probably have to go up through your roof, you don't have to have the rapid shutdown. And then the second thing that you do is when you have an array, is you can mount the inverter outside, which they're completely okay as long as they don't get hit by heavy sun. It could be 10 feet away from the array. Otherwise, you have to install little modules in a string inverter on every single panel. It's like $50 extra per panel. It's extra work to install it. That type of thing. So.
Shane, explain that a bit more if you wouldn't mind. So what is the fire department doing? They're getting on the roof and going to each individual panel and shutting it down?
No, the rapid shutdown, it's called RSS, is part of the inverter. So the inverter firmware will send a signal to these little boxes on each individual panel saying, hey, shut down. There's an emergency shutdown.
I gotcha. It's a communication thing, not a physical thing. Gotcha.
The ground mount doesn't require that. Like if you look at, by the way, if anybody's interested in my arrays, you're welcome to come over. It is my doggy area, so it's kind of dirty in that area, but you're welcome to come over and take a look at it. I have string, which is extremely simple in terms of an install, and I'll talk about that in just a minute. But you literally will look at what I've done, and you're like, that's it? Yeah, that's it. It's really simple. The hardest part about doing this as a do-it-yourselfer is basically making sure that you meet all the requirements for NEC, and also making sure that you have the strength and the wherewithal to sit on the roof for 2 days straight. That's what it took me and my brother-in-law to install solar on her roof, my sister's roof, 2 days. Luckily, it wasn't hot in Indiana, so it wasn't terrible. But anyways, I'm going to ask questions. Are there any installers here? John?
No, I just I'd been kind of texting you on the Nextdoor app, so I'm kind of responding to emails. But
Okay.
yeah, my buddy actually is not really an installer per se, but he's worked in the past to install solar systems like on high-end RVs and stuff.
Okay.
So I'm my go-to in terms of doing the actual labor, and I have to be the go-to in terms of figuring out the best setup and how to go about getting this thing set up.
Okay. Well, I'm going to kind of open it to questions. I have tons of information I can share you. I could actually tell you right up front, here's what you need to do if you want to get it done. I mean, or I can just have you guys ask questions relative to your level of interest.
Well, if you don't mind me going first, I mistakenly did one of those, punch in your zip code to get some information about solar. And then of course I'm bombarded by 4 different companies, like all wanting to come out at the same time. And I should have waited for, for this to at least ask you to see if you've gone through that route to see if it's even, remotely like worthwhile going through a company, or if, all those ones that say 0 money down, all that kind of stuff still ends up giving you like a $30,000 price tag that they expect you to recoup it over the next 20 years.
Yeah. That's a great question, because you hear people say 5, 6, 7 year return on their investment. You literally have to install it yourself to get a 4 or 5 year return on your investment. Somebody on Nextdoor said they got it for $1.30 a watt, and they had 2 inverters installed. Those 2 inverters alone would have been half the cost of their system. I don't know how they got it that cheap. And it may have been, Duke had something called SunSense, where they basically paid you $2 a kilowatt for the install. And that ran it. Well, they realized, oh no, that's a bad idea, and they stopped doing that. I tried to get in on that a while ago. But I've gotten quotes from Vivint. I've gotten a quote from Florida Solar. I've gotten, I think, 3 or 4 quotes over the years, and they've all been stupid expensive. I did get a quote from Tesla, which is the cheapest by far and away of anybody that quoted my system. Tesla uses SolarEdge. They use optimizers. They put rapid shutdown in. They do the roof installs, and I read that they did Panasonic panels, which are really expensive panels.
I read that.
Yeah. Now, so if you want somebody to install it, I got the quote. It was $2.06. This year, you have a 26% federal tax credit if you have that ability to apply that to your taxes. And there is no one that can come close to $1.50 a watt to install it, and that I've found.
Yeah.
And I would challenge anybody to be able to find that. It just doesn't exist, especially with high-end equipment. But with that said, I told you the $40,000 for a 10 kilowatt system. There's also something on Nextdoor. There was some confusion about the limits. We have a tier 1, a tier 2, and a tier 3. And for residential, you're usually between tier 1 and tier 2. Tier 1 is 10 kilowatt max. Tier 2 is 14 kilowatt max. And I'll explain what that means and how that applies to your electric bill. A 10 kilowatt system, if properly installed, has the ability to produce about 1,000 kilowatts of power a month on average in a perfect scenario. That will, if you are at that level, $150 a month electric bill, eliminate your electric bill. A 14 kilowatt system will notch it up a little bit more, so you can, and everything over 1,000 kilowatts more expensive, so you're getting closer to $220, $230 a month and or more.
That's
actually.
me.
So the worst thing that I've seen people installing is they've been disappointed in their production because somebody's estimated that, hey, it's going to save you this much money, and it really doesn't. My sister's is an example that I tried so hard to tell her that this is what you're going to produce, but in her head, she multiplied that times 50%, and it's not doing that. And she's like, well, why is it not producing? I told you it wouldn't. She has a 10 kilowatt, 9.1 kilowatt system actually. So anyways, sorry about that, but anything over 10K requires a $1 million bond, which is only like a couple $100 a month at most, and it requires a AC shutdown switch next to your meter, and that's not terribly difficult to do. Might cost you an extra, $300-400 at most, depending how far away your meter is from your inverter. Another thing is the confusion of AC versus DC power. When you're getting something sold to you, they're selling it to you as DC power. So if you get a 10 kilowatt system, they're selling it to you as 10 kilowatt in panel rated wattage. And in Florida, you're never going to get more than 85% of that power. And it's generally less than that. You'll never peak your panels, ever. It's just not physically possible for a variety of reasons, even though the panels are rated in a perfect scenario, 0 to plus 5%. So a 10 kilowatt system at most is going to produce maybe 7.5 kilowatts on average an hour, or let's rate it by minute. And it's only going to produce that for an hour, hour and a half at most. And so it's better to look at the AC power. And somebody asked me, I think it was Robert asked me about this, because perfect position is an azimuth of, I think, 180 or whatever, south facing. And you have this thing called equinox, solstice for the summer and solstice for the winter. And that changes the location of the sun, across the sky. And what's crazy is in June, the sun actually crosses the equinox over, and it actually passes, I'm sorry, not equinox. It passes over 180 degrees. It goes into like 190 degrees at like 4 o'clock in the evening. In certain parts of the country, even further. I think Florida's a little later, but that makes it like my array, my south-facing array actually stops producing earlier because of that. It gets behind the array. And so that type of thing really messes up the production. I apologize. I'm going off on a little different tangent. So I'm going to stop there, ask questions, and I'll start again.
So really, it sounds like you're saying, obviously, your position of your house and everything, different times of year is going to alternate, but you still want to kind of get the mean or the average of where the best spot is on your roof to be able to, accumulate the most electricity.
Correct. I put mine south face 21 degrees to produce evenly throughout the year so that I would get better winter time production. Better summer time production would be closer to like 11 or 12 degrees. And it would actually hide the panels better. I probably should have done that from out of respect for my neighbors. Some neighbors don't like it. I think it's beautiful, but some people believe it's ugly.
I have a question. I know you were saying tier 1 and tier 2, the 10 kilowatts and the 14, and that's based upon the usage, like maybe $100 bill, but if you go over like 230, you said a tier 2. So like for like the roof panels, does it matter like how much you actually use? It's best to do like a tier 2?
Well, that's a great question, because what you can do is stay under tier 1 and get a 10 kilowatt inverter. And this is the thing that I'm a little bit confused about with Duke, because they're very ambiguous. But if you do a 10 kilowatt inverter, which is the limit AC limit for tier 1, you can put in on a single 10 kilowatt inverter 15 kilowatts of power. So if you put in a south facing 15 kilowatt array, you're going to produce about 80% of that 15, and then you're going to start clipping your inverter. So it will, like at 11 o'clock in the morning till 2:30 in the afternoon, it's going to be reaching the limit of that inverter and basically wasting all that electricity. But you can stand at the 10K and still produce $200+ worth of electricity.
Now,
Good.
the other question is, doing a ground is better because you can actually face it south, which is best for the energy. But like on the roof, for myself, I only have west and east.
That's perfect though. I actually didn't go east-west facing
Yes.
because I was kind of ignorant when I started to the process. And east-west facing, because we're limited to 10K. When I got it 3 years ago, they told me it was DC power limited. It's AC power limited. So if you put 8 kilowatts on one side, 8 kilowatts on the other side, you're never going to hit, or very rarely ever going to hit, a 10K inverter. You're not going to peak it.
Right.
So you basically now have 16 kilowatts of panels and a 10 kilowatt inverter, and you're going to produce more throughout the day than way more than I will ever produce with my south facing 10K. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does.
Okay.
And you know, when I did that zip code thing,
Uh-huh.
because I did that as well, and they actually show you the panels, I had more facing the west and a few facing, a total of like 38 was what they estimated.
38 total for east and west?
38 totals of panels, but split. The majority were in the west side,
Okay.
west, south.
Okay.
Case, yeah.
That does come into a little bit of a problem. For example, I'm a big string inverter, and we can talk about the three technologies. There's three main technologies. String, which is super simple. You just connect your panels in series, like one right after the other,
Right.
and you're allowed 550 volts of power and 10 amps. It's actually about 8 amps through that string. So you can connect about, let's see, how many panels would that be? What, I don't know, 36 volts per panel. So you can connect like 15 panels in that one string. So on an east-west, 15 panels on each side, that works great. However, like my sister, she did 20 on one side, 10 on the other. That actually hurt her production
Oh,
because she's got an inverter that's getting a lot when the sun's coming up. And as the sun crosses over the horizon or overhead, it starts hitting the west side, and she's virtually producing a third or even a little less than that because she had shade on that side as well, which it wasn't a perfect scenario for her. There are 3 strings in the SMA inverters, so you can actually have 3 strings of panels, roughly 45 panels, 50 panels max. So. By the way, any of that doesn't make sense, I can clarify a little bit more. But.
Saying you said there were 3 types of inverters. The
Yes.
string was the easiest. You didn't elaborate on the other 2.
The other 2, Solar Edge is the big one. Solar Edge is basically a conventional inverter, much like a string inverter, but you install these little boxes on each one of the panels that allows it to bypass that panel in the event that it gets shaded. And it also includes intrinsic rapid shutdown. So it's actually built into that system. The problem is cost. It's about 2.5 to 3 times more expensive than a string inverter configuration. just for
What's
the
the
inverter part.
I get the rapid shutdown part. What's the benefit of shutting down the panel?
When you have shade, another great question. There's all kinds of technologies with panels. And let me just go through those real quick. First of all, there's two different panels. There's a 60 cell panel, which is normally used on residential homes. And then there's 72 cell panels that are generally commercial. I have 72 cells on my in my ground mount because I didn't care. I wanted the cheapest cost per watt. And each one of those cells are little 6-inch cells, right? And they have bus bars in them. So mine had 3 bus bars. Now they have 6 bus bars. They also now cut those cells in half to now they're 144 or 120 cell panels. So I just bought a new set of 30 panels that are going on my roof at my other house that my parents live in. I bought a house for them to stay in. So we're going to put these 144 cell panels. And what they do is once you hit shade on any one of those little 6-inch cells, you immediately stop the production of 1/3 of that panel. And there are 3 diodes basically at each 60 cell panel in conventional solar. So as you shade that panel, that one panel will destroy the production on every single other panel in your string. So if you have 15 panels, 350 watts on each panel, and one panel gets shaded 100%, you're not producing at all.
Oh, boy.
Yeah. But if you have Solar Edge, what it will do is make an attempt to shut down that panel and bypass it, allowing the other panels in the array to continue producing. The downside of those systems, though, is they don't work perfectly. And in fact, they will shut down an entire array string before it needs to. And then a string array is actually more efficient at that point. So I'm not a big fan of Solar Edge because of the reliability, largely, their cost. And I'm just not convinced they do enough. And in none of my installs would they have benefited me at all because I haven't had shade issues until my sister's. So I got to really experience shade issues with the string array at my sister's house, it's actually pretty crazy. At 1 o'clock, our production drops to 30% of what it should be. But it's heavily shaded. Almost the entire roof is shaded.
So if I'm hearing you right, you've got 3 strings per inverter. Your best option would be to wire the strings such that if there is a shaded area, it's all on one string.
Correct.
So that you keep them kind of bundled into what could shut off a section, so to speak, right?
My array, if you look at I don't think you've seen it, Robert, but I have 25 panels.
I saw it on your video.
Okay. The left side is 1 string. The second 2 rows are another string, and then the other final 2 rows are another string. And the reason I did the first 5 is because in the south facing in the wintertime, my first 5 rows start getting shaded very quickly at 4:30 in the afternoon. And then I have another problem. This was my mistake. I put it over a power line, so I get bird crap on it, and that reduces my power on that array by a very small margin. But so my middle panel is my most productive panel, most productive string, actually. John, do you have a question?
No, I was just thinking, I kind of sent you that link about that company that essentially has got solar tech that doesn't require you to have to feed into the rest of, the actual power grid. It just goes, plugs in directly to your system, and I guess uses that first, whether you're, actively producing, it'll use it, or whether you're actually like actively producing and then storing it into batteries that are, stacked up.
Yeah.
I just wasn't sure if you'd had a chance to kind of look into that because, I wasn't sure with the rules and everything that you've read, if that's even something that's permittable.
Yeah, it is permittable. Tesla actually offers that as an option here in Florida, and there's other systems as well. It's basically effectively a generator with a switch box that switches.
Right.
Inverters have to shut down, and when you sign up for the interconnection, you have to sign a document stating that you abide by the UL 1741 rule that shuts an inverter down when the grid shuts down to protect those on the line, right? there are ways around that, but they're not good. It's actually very dangerous. It's better to have one of those switches so that in the event you have a power outage, it switches, disconnects you from the grid, and then the battery from the power for the battery will pick up.
It's
By the
basically,
way,
it's
go ahead.
basically a transfer switch like a generator has. Yeah.
Correct. And the battery technology and the inverter technology combined is crazy intelligent. You can tell it what to send where, when to pull from what. So you can even pull, like, depending on which rate schedule you're on. Apparently, some people in St. Pete or Pinellas have rate schedules that change relative to the time of day. They got grandfathered in 2013 or 12 or something like that. So you can actually tell your battery to be used when you're pulling more than your solar's producing until that rate change occurs where it's more economical for it to pull from the grid. Now, with that said, great question on the battery. No way, no ifs, ands, or buts, battery backup was not the right solution due to cost. It'd be better to have a generator backup. With being connected to the grid and not having the ability to really use solar when your grid goes down, that's where the generator would kick in. The batteries to power my house were about $28,000 for me to install. So if I went Tesla, it was almost the same price because for whatever reason, Tesla's like giving away their batteries right now. If you install a Tesla roof, and I'm not talking about the shingles, I'm talking about the conventional $2.06 a watt, right? The batteries, I think they were 18 kilowatt batteries, were $5,000 a piece. And I think that was installed, if I remember correctly. It was very, very cheap. But it still amounted to me needing to spend $20,000+ and buying the array, the system from Tesla.
Yeah, because that's what all the companies that are trying to fish your information to do sales calls. That's what they're all advertising because everyone it's easily recognizable. It's pretty. They always say it's not associated with Tesla, but they probably offer that as their primary option just for the cost of the batteries.
Yeah, well, again, I have looked at two other manufacturers that also. I'm a big fan of lithium iron phosphate batteries. I actually have 24 kilowatt of lithium iron phosphate in my garage that I was going to use as a backup. I did not do that. I still have them in the garage, but now I do a race called the Everglades Challenge, the 300-mile race on kayaks. So I'm actually going to put those batteries in a kayak and do a solo race possibly in March. But anyways, lithium iron phosphate will literally last decades. They're better than the Tesla batteries. And in fact, Tesla is going to lithium iron phosphate in China because that technology is just superior to lithium ion for many reasons. But anyways, they're safe. They don't blow up. They don't rage out of control. They're healthy for the environment. You can literally throw them in the garbage can because the active ingredient is iron, so and lithium.
So you're saying as a backup battery for like a hurricane or backup power for a hurricane, you would not put battery power on your solar system. You would put a backup generator on.
I would. I'd have to have 4 batteries in order to survive 2 or 3 days. And the reality is, in the event of a hurricane out, we had 3 days with that tropical storm where I literally produced nothing. And in that situation, had I been out of power, my batteries wouldn't have survived it. I would have been empty. With lithium iron, with lithium ion, you can't use 100% of that battery. Matter of fact, if you drop it below 50%, you're damaging the battery. And if you charge it to 100% and keep it there, you're damaging the battery. So for longevity, you can go buy a diesel generator for a 1/5 of that cost. Again, that's my personal opinion.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And in 20 years from now, the diesel generator will still start with the same gas you put in it 20 years later, or not gas, but diesel.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I've looked at the propane generator, same kind of concept. And the issue is when you start burning propane, you burn a lot of dollars a day. Forget about the generator cost. But for $1,000, you can get a decent sized generator these days.
Yeah.
If you have a 2-week outage, you're going to eat it. But if you have a 3-day outage, you're right. There's just no point in doing it. And the batteries don't last forever either.
Well, and that's a concern of mine. I've actually owned 5 electric cars. a BMW i3, a couple. I haven't done Tesla yet, but all of them had degraded batteries. In fact, our Nissan Leaf had the battery replaced because it was down to 55% of its capacity within 3 years of life of the car being new. So that always makes me nervous, although they were passively cooled, but still.
How much extra capacity? You said, I think I saw in your video you were running 2 electric car charging stations out of your house. How much extra capacity did that take to put that into your solar array?
That's actually a great question as well, because it's massive. On a full sun day, peak time, dead of summer, I'm producing 65 off of that one array, almost 9 kilowatts. In order to power my electric car at 70 miles an hour, it would use every ounce of that power. So that gives you kind of an idea of how much power an electric car requires. My wife goes to Tampa and comes back, it's 16 kilowatts of power that we have to put back into her car. And these solar arrays are only producing 50 a day. So that's 30-some% of your power going back into one car. It's really hard to be net zero when you have 2 electric cars. I'm a professor, so I don't go into campus a lot. But my wife injured her leg, so she hasn't been going in either. So we're like banking the kilowatts right now because we don't have to pay that 16 to 30 kilowatts a day. I also charge at work. So
Gotcha.
yeah, if you have a Tesla, I mean, I have 900 kilowatts of power queued up from the last 3 months, and a Tesla is going to take, 100 plus of that in one charge. By the way, the third inverter is actually what they call micro inverters, and those were very popular installs here in Florida. One of the advantages of both the in-phase microinverter and the solar edge inverters is that you can do panel level monitoring. So you can actually tell how much power each panel in your solar array is producing. And that's kind of cool for geeky people. It really doesn't help you a whole lot because panels don't normally go bad. What does happen is they get hot spots, like if they're shaded a lot or if there's a manufacturing defect. But you can find that out without actually monitoring the panel. They'll actually start to discolor.
As far as like placement goes, I mean, if you're using, the micro inverters, you're able to at least see if the placement that you're using and angles and all that is actually giving you the desired results, or you can maybe even, get some that are, I don't even know if they have mounts for them that are slightly adjustable to where you can just kind of tweak them, or if you just kind of have to set them as is and take them apart.
Yeah, I mean, and that is an advantage of both the in-phase and the solar edge, the optimizer system, and that is a huge advantage. The problem with in-phase systems is a lot of times they can't keep up with the power production of a panel. So, for example, when I got that quote for $44,000, the panels were 305 watt, and I had the quote for microinverters, in-phase microinverters, but the microinverters were 240 watt. So these panels were being chopped at their peak production down to 240 watts, which was actually terrible. And I was ignorant at the time. That was 2013. And I would have been terribly disappointed that I was capping all my panels. And that's the same thing I'm having now. Like in my garage, my panels are they're 395 watts. You can't find the microinverters to power that. And in fact, I missed out in June. They had the dual phase, the bifacial, where you actually produce top and bottom, which would be great for a ground mount. They were 500 watt panels. You can't put an in-phase system, a microinverter system, in that type of an array. It's not possible without losing massive power, just throwing it all away. So, also, in-phase had a lot of problems. Solar Edge with their latest generation of inverters is having a lot of problems right now. It makes me a little nervous, but I would probably go Solar Edge over in-phase, the microinverter. Any other questions?
I have a ton of questions, but I don't want to overtake the discussion. One thing you said in your video I was interested about with the ground mount arrays, you said breathability of the panels, getting air underneath them was allowing for higher efficiencies. You said you'd prefer a roof mount, but you're not necessarily getting that breathability. What does that mean from a efficiency perspective?
You in Florida, well, actually anywhere, your panels will drop about 20% of their production capacity in the summertime. So in the heat of the summer with perfect sun directly over the panels, 10 kilowatts of power is only 10 kilowatts of panels is only producing a little over 7,000 kilowatts of power because the heat destroys their productivity. There is actually something called the temperature coefficient that they're improving slowly on these panels. And that is how much your production drops relative to each Celsius of temperature that panel reaches. So in Florida, one of the things that nobody tells anybody is that temperature coefficient and how important it is. So when you're looking at panels, look for panels that have a temperature coefficient of, and it's the higher number, so the 30, 36, 37 minimum, and you'll actually produce more. On the roof, the panels are so close to the roof, they don't have the opportunity for the heat to escape. So it kind of really boils the panels. On my solar array, the productivity, I actually have 2 arrays. One is actually on the roof and one is not. And the one on my solar array is about 10% more productive. It produces about 10% more electricity. I can actually take a hose and spray the back of my panels and increase the productivity of my panels by 10%. And also, if it's a cloudy day, believe it or not, the clouds don't hurt me a terrible amount as long as it's a nice cloudy day. Because those clouds go over the panels, they drop the production, and then they pass by, and I spike 20%. I will literally clip my inverter for like 20 minutes after the cloud goes by because the panel cooled off.
Cools off.
So it's pretty crazy to see that, but it is pretty significant.
Have you heard of anybody doing anything like, just routing some kind of air or, making some kind of air tunnel underneath between your roof or your panels?
Yeah.
Again, I don't know. I actually considered, when I first installed the array, is actually building a system that actually sprayed a mist on the back of the panels. And apparently that's done. You could buy that. So that was one idea I had. My ground mount, because it's 21 degrees, believe it or not, for whatever reason, it creates this airflow that when we sit under the panels during the summer, and we get a really strong breeze because it collapses the wind as it goes down. So it's really effective at cooling those panels. But no, I haven't considered anything beyond misting the panels. I
gotcha. Yeah, I was just kind of curious because a buddy of mine, like, he routed, he sends his pool water through his attic and it ends up heating it that way. It's just as a means of, kind of a heat exchanger.
One of the things that we did notice is we actually, at my sister's house, we actually installed one of the panels over one of the roof vents, which was probably a mistake because that heat is coming up onto that panel and it's going to destroy the production of all the other panels on that back side. So, but yeah.
I was thinking the opposite. I have a pool. I was thinking of running the pool water under the panels.
There you go. Somebody mentioned the vacuum tube hot water heater. Was that Robert?
That was me, yeah.
Yeah. I actually, believe it or not, I bought a bunch from a container of vacuum tubes. I had probably 2,000 vacuum tubes. And I just threw them away. I kept them for like 10 years.
That thing was extremely efficient. The reason I did the vacuum tube versus I have a pool solar system here that heats my pool, which works very well. But I lived in North Carolina at the time, and you have to shut the system down during the freezing weather if you're pumping water on your roof. With a vacuum tube system, you're basically pumping antifreeze up to the roof so it never freezes. And that system would produce 80 gallons at 240 degrees pretty much every day year round.
Yeah, I'd put water in them, and 10 minutes later, it would boil. It would burn your skin. It would boil.
When I installed the system, you literally had to take them up there under a blanket and pull them out from under the blanket and plug them into the copper tube because the ends of them would get so hot instantly. It was amazing how hot this got. Very effective system, worked very well.
I was going to keep them and like give them to the colleges and universities to cook like hot dogs for the chemistry events or whatever.
Experiment with or something, right?
Yeah. But anyway, sorry about that. Getting back to it. By the way, there's another thing is poly and crystalline and monocrystalline panels. The poly are kind of dead at this point, so try not to. I don't even know anybody that produces poly polys anymore. But basically, mono is a single silica cell, where poly is where they crush them up and smash them together and then cut them. And those don't produce as well in the heat. And it's arguably more loss of production over time. When you first put a panel on the roof, you're going to lose within the first couple hours 2% or so of that production of that panel. And then after that, it settles down to maybe 0.2 to 0.5 max per year percentage, which is why everybody has the 25-year warranty on them, so to keep the 80% production.
Where are you getting most of your panels? I've looked online. I can't remember the name of the place I bought the evacuated tubes from, but you're saying you're putting commercial in. Where's the best place to go? Because I've gone online and looked for panels myself, thinking of a DIY installation, and they're charging just an ass load for these things,
Yeah.
which brings me back to the cost of paying Tesla to come in and install it.
Well, the wholesale cost today in the general vicinity, Orlando, Tampa, is 50 to 60 cents a watt. I do have a wholesale account, and you're more than welcome to use it. You'll just have to pay the taxes on it. Anybody wants to install it if you want to buy the panels locally. However, buying the panels from California and Nevada are a lot cheaper. A lot of the panels that end up here in St. Pete, Tampa, Clearwater, whatever, they actually come from those areas. For example, I bought 30 panels, 144 cell, 395 watt, which are really high production panels, Q cell, which is a good grade Chinese panel. And I bought them for 25 cents a watt. They were $96, and I got 3% back. So it was, $93, $94 a panel. So that's actually less than 25 cents a watt, which is less than half the wholesale cost in the area. But they're B-grade panels. They're what they call white label. They're not UL listed. So I can't recommend those to anybody unless you really know where you're going to put them. In order to technically install them and get it connected to the grid, they need to be UL listed. And I can get those panels from Nevada, California, whatever, from multiple sources. And you could as well, just by calling them. Between all black, even beautiful panels, between 30 to 45 cents a watt, depending on the production.
Are most of these panels being made in China?
Almost all of the ones that I'm quoting are made in China. The ones that are made in the U.S., you're going to Sun Power, Canadian Solar, North America anyway. You're going to pay a little bit more for them unless they're older model panels.
I've bought LED lighting directly from China. I've got a buddy that sources product from China, and
Yeah.
you can actually go directly to China and buy this type of stuff if you can consolidate it and bring it overseas.
I've tried. I'm a member of ENF, and you can't get it from China unless you're willing to buy thousands of panels. I've tried. I actually considered loading up my garage and selling.
Yeah, let them out of your garage. Yeah, good idea.
Yeah. I'm not into. I'm a computer scientist and I'm a professor, and I'm kind of semi-retired. I don't really want to get back involved in any endeavor like that. But I definitely want to promote, for personal reasons, alternative energy. And again, no politics aside, it's very important to me because my children and their children. So anything I can do to help and I promised them I would. So that's why I'm here.
And then, and guys, I'm sorry, I'll keep asking questions. If somebody jumps in, I'm sorry. As far as like the roof mount hardware and all that stuff, are you buying that from the same place you're buying the panels from, or is there a better type of place to buy that type of equipment and the inverter, et cetera?
Well, and again, I can go through all this. I can tell you where I buy it from. I actually buy all my racking from CED in Tampa. They have an office in Sarasota as well. Because of wholesale, they sell to me wholesale. So anything I find online, like let's say the rails, Unirac and Iron Ridge are the two main systems. Iron Ridge is the higher end, and it's the one almost everybody uses. I prefer Unirac because it's cheaper, and I'm trying to reduce my cost, right, to increase my return on my investment sooner. But a 14-foot rail from CED through my wholesale account, I think it was $36. And that same rail, the cheapest I can find it online for, is $48. Unirac, same thing. And here's what's really bad, the shipping charges. The 14-foot, 16-foot, 20-foot rails, shipping-wise, can cost hundreds of dollars. So buying it locally from CED is, especially being wholesale cost, is really cost effective.
So basically, you're building the structure yourself. You're getting just rails and cutting them down to size and putting them together, basically like an erector set.
Okay. Let me just go through real quick for those that are seriously interested in this. First, here's how I went about it. This is probably the best way to explain what I did. I just went and bought 10 kilowatt panels. Not sure what I was going to do with them. Not sure if I needed 60 cell, 72 cell. And I bought the cheapest possible panels I could find. I wanted to be between 25 to 35 cents a kilowatt. And this was back in 2017. So I got 72 cells. I think they ended up being 33 cents a kilowatt and shipped. And I had them delivered to my house. And you can see that in my video. I literally got them. And I'm like, oh, I don't know what to do with them. I put them in the garage and kind of waited to kind of plan it out in my head. So next thing you got to do is permitting. So I went and started researching what it would take to permit. And this is what's the hardest part about this whole thing, because you have to have a PE stamp on the mount points from the racking to the roof, or from the racking to the ground. Unirac and Iron Ridge both provide PE for, and by the way, sorry, PE is if you're an engineer.
Professional engineer, yeah.
Right, professional engineer. Basically stamps saying that this will survive 145 mile an hour winds. The Iron Ridge and Unirac both provide a PE for their equipment, but they don't provide it for the attachments to your roof. So you have to go out and find an engineer to sign off saying that, hey, this will survive 145 mile an hour because your roof has 1 inch, planks, and the screws are this long and this strong, whatever. That was the hardest part. Mm-hmm. And for me, what I did is I went to Unirac, and this was really hard. Iron Ridge wouldn't even talk to me. My ground mount had to be mounted in the ground to survive 145 mile an hour winds. And I wanted it 15 feet in the air. No one would touch it. And I told Unirac, I said, hey, listen, I'll put up a video and put you on my website if you engineer this for me and stamp it. And they did. So they signed off, your engineer signed off on the mount point, the 40,000 pounds of concrete I had to put into my ground so that those things would stay still in 145 mile an hour winds. I called them again after that, and they said they would never do that ever again. However, I do know somebody, I have a contact that will sign off on roof mount, Iron Ridge, and Unirac mounting and give you a PE stamp for a couple $100.
Oh, I need that then.
Yeah. So I can get that to you guys.
Yeah.
So anyways, go to Unirac's website, lay out your roof on there. They have a website where you can lay out all your panels on your roof. They'll give you an itemized list, a bill of materials. Take that to CED, and again, I can have you go under my account and get a price. You can pay for it directly. I don't have to take your money, so you know exactly what you're paying for. Buy your panels. Santan, there's a guy named Jason at Santan, SANTAN. He's the person that I buy all my panels from. He gives me the lowest price by far of any other, half the cost of wholesale in some cases. And he will negotiate a little bit as well. If you're buying entire pallets of panels, or even 2 pallets, he'll drop the price, 5–10% sometimes. So once you have your racking, once you have your panels, you got to get your permit. The permit, there are several companies, I can give you a link to one of those companies that will actually give you a package that you can actually deliver for like $200 or $300. You can deliver to Pinellas County, and it's actually very simple if you have all your ducks in a row. You got that PE stamp, they just sign off on it. They literally can't argue with an engineer. I mean, it's going to last, right? Put your panels on your roof with your racking. Buy an inverter, whatever technology you want. Again, if you do a string inverter, it's very simple. Just put the string inverter on your garage, outside your garage, inside your garage, whatever. And there are up to 6 wires coming from your array if you do like a 3-string. And they use what they call PV wire or USE2 wire. And by the way, I'm recording this so you can watch it.
Yeah.
And
So I
that
can
wire
take
is,
notes again.
yeah, that wire is expensive, but it's UV protected, right? So like what we did in my sister's house is we connected, they use MC4 Amphenol connectors. They're a standard connector, and you can buy a little kit for $10 where you can actually crimp your own MC4 connectors onto your USE2 wire. And we ran it into a waterproof box, and from there we went standard THHN, 8-gauge THHN for each one of the strings, because THHN is not UV protected, but it can be used in conduit, and it's way cheaper. We ran that down to the inverter. We actually fused it as well, although it's not required because it's only 10 amps. And then those 6 wires go to the inverter, and then you have 3 wires coming and a ground coming out of your inverter into your panel. I use 6-gauge. I think 8-gauge is plenty for a 7.5 amp breaker. I forget exactly what it was now. 35 amp breaker. 35 amp breaker. And that's it. You're done. You're producing power at that point. It's absolutely crazy. There are some rules.
That's awesome.
For a 10, well, there's a 125% rule. So basically, when you have it in panel, right? Most homes have 100, 150, or 200 amp panel. For even a smaller system, you need a 200 amp panel. And you have to actually calculate the amount of power you're going to pull from that panel, because you're only allowed to go over 125%. So if you have a 200 amp panel, you're allowed like a 50 amp breaker. You put that breaker at the very bottom of your panel, and that's your backfeed breaker. That's what you plug your inverter into your panel. Once you do that, you're producing power, and all your devices in your house will start consuming this power because it's closer than it will from the grid. And it just starts sucking it up. And anything you overproduce just goes right out of your house, right into the grid. And that's where the meter interconnect backfeed meter comes into play. So it reverses effectively your meter, so you can get credit for that power you're sending back to the grid.
So the meter, sorry, Shane, the meter you're talking about, so you're running the array directly into a 50 amp into your 200 amp panel, and then you've got your feed from the meter that's there. Their meter for the solar is going all on the Duke Energy side?
Correct. They put in a meter, which is the new smart meter. It's not a special meter for solar. It has nothing to do with solar. But their new smart meters allow it to read power bidirectional.
So there's no separate meter. They're basically,
Yeah,
you're plugging. The reason I'm asking, I was telling you about the rental house I have. It has a whole separate set of, it has 2 meters.
Before net metering come into play, what they had is they had 2 separate meters, and they would actually buy the power from you. And I think there's like 14 states that do this. So every single kilowatt you produce in those states, they buy from you at wholesale at 6% or 6 cents a watt, right? But then they charge you 17 cents a watt to use it. Those states, it's absolutely terrible. Again, that is politics playing a role, but we are not one of those states. Net metering now allows us to just reverse the meter. So you may want to have them update that.
So you're saying possibly I'm not getting what I should out of that system because
I'd have to look at it, but possibly. You may have been set up prior to net metering.
I was telling you earlier how confused I was when I looked at the mess that was over there.
Yeah. And by the way, I made it sound, I guess, fairly simple. There are a couple things you have to be careful of. You have to be careful of conduits, right? You have to be careful of the RSS, which is the rapid shutdown. Rapid shutdown is probably going to be, beside your permit, one of the most difficult things to do with the install, because you're going to have to basically install a little box on each one of your panels that communicates wirelessly to another box that communicates with your inverter. That inverter will send a signal to your panels to shut down. That's what rapid shutdown is. And that's a safety feature in case you get a fire in the house or your PV wire starts going haywire, the inverter, like if there's an arc fault. Inverters have arc fault protection. But if you take DC, like if I had my 10 panels plugged in, I'm pushing at 550 volts. And if I bring them about 2 inches together, a plasma arc will fire off between them. Very, very dangerous. DC is more dangerous than AC, actually, which is, it's crazy. Again, if you know the history between Edison and Tesla. But with that said, there's a lot of safety factors now that go into that. That's what that rapid shutdown is for, to save that from happening.
Why can't you just do a transfer switch type of scenario rather than a rapid shutdown per panel type of situation?
It has to be automated, smart, intelligent, and that's what the inverters do. The inverters actually can fire off the shutdown in the event that it sees something wrong in the string. It can shut down the entire string. You can't turn, I think I mentioned this earlier, I don't know if it was just with you. A solar panel is producing dangerous levels of power when they hit sun. Literally, I like put blankets over all my panels before I start working with the electricity, and I actually got jolted. My ground mount, I only did it at night. Like you'll actually see on the video, late at night was when I was actually connecting everything, and I got electrocuted because I didn't think there was much power. It was like 20 some volts or something. It jolted me pretty good, but I had 10 panels connected at that time, and it was nighttime. I don't know where I was going with that, but just be careful. I know where I was going. Just make sure you're not plugging those things in. Like, for example, it's actually fairly safe to plug panels in back to back, because the way electricity in DC flows is from positive to negative. It creates a circuit, right? So as long as you don't have anything connected to that circuit, no electricity is flowing. So theoretically, you can still connect and not kill yourself. But again, it's better that you wait till late at night or put white, really dark blankets over your panels to stop those things from producing any power before you plug them in.
Yeah, the panels aren't like capacitors. I mean, they don't retain power. They just generate.
No, only while it's sunny.
Only while it's sunny. Yeah.
By the way, another conversation. One of the advantages of the SMA inverters, which are the string inverters. Sorry, my dogs are barking. They have what they call secure power supply. So in the event that you get a power outage, you flip a switch, and there's a 2K outlet that you can plug into it. And as long as you're producing the power from the sun that you need to power your refrigerator or whatever, it is in fact power out power, which is pretty cool.
It's almost battery. It's not battery backup, but it's real-time backup power
Correct.
you can use. That's interesting.
And it's disconnected from the grid because UL 1741 will not allow it to connect to the grid without all the switching equipment. So it's you basically wire a separate outlet just for that inverter.
But that's assuming that you don't have the individual boxes at the panel shutting that off, right?
Correct. But by the way, the UL 1741 inverters, and that's required, will by definition shut down once they see no power coming from the grid. They're monitoring for that power. So if you have a power switch that shuts off automatically, the inverter's still not going to produce power. You have to have another power source to trick the inverter into continuing the power, whether that's a generator, battery pack, or something.
That's where you were saying you have a small generator that you could feed in during a critical time like that to basically fake the thing out so that it gives you the power from the panels.
Yeah, that's not technically legal with 1741, but it is possible.
Gotcha.
You're not supposed to do that.
But it's still not sending, well, theoretically that could send power back into the grid unless you shut that 50 amp breaker off in your main panel.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, if you're going to do that, make sure you have an auto disconnect where it switches automatically.
Right. You still got to kill it somehow before it gets back to the panel. No, I'm following you.
Yeah, I mean, you literally could kill somebody. I mean, that's how dangerous it is. So.
I mean, it's the same thing with a generator. If you didn't have a transfer switch and you hooked a generator up to your panel and you didn't switch the main breaker off, you're feeding the entire neighborhood.
Correct.
Whether you know you're doing it or not.
Correct. Any other questions? By the way, I have a lot more information. But,
I'm sure I can think of some, but I've been studying all day and my brain's about cooked. So
hang on one second. You said you've been studying all day?
yeah, I got a job interview next week and just been doing about, 3 weeks of prep for it.
Oh, wow. Well, good luck on that. That's crazy.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Yeah, after I actually get that all said and done, and especially if I get that job, then I'll be able to kind of really go a little more gung-ho into this project. But until then, it's kind of more the research phase.
Well, I can tell you, anybody that's interested, I'm interested, right? So I will act as an advisor to you for the limited knowledge I do have. I do have 4 installs. I'm doing a 5th one. I'm actually in the process of doing a 5th one. And you can actually watch what I'm doing. I'm actually, I just got the panels in the garage. I've got the inverter in the garage. I have to upgrade the panel to 200 amp, which an electrician will charge me about $2,000 to do that. And I'm considering doing it myself. The only problem is the feed-in lines from the power company have to be able to handle that 200 amp of power. And I haven't verified that yet. So I may just do that myself because I can do it for $200 versus 2,000. I will have to get a permit.
I've done that before, Shane. I've wired entire houses. I mean, I could help you with that.
That'd be fantastic. Just make sure I don't. That's something you don't want to mess up, right?
Yeah, no, I've wired entire houses, rewired my entire house. I can definitely help you with that. And I know the gauge sizes and what they can run. It's not as hard as it sounds. The biggest issue with that is to pull the meter hub off to cut that power. Working in that box always makes me a little
Yeah, exactly.
unhappy.
That when it comes to that, sometimes I'm willing to pay somebody else to do it. I don't want to, that kind of scares me a little bit. But anyways, and if you want to see what I'm doing, or if anybody here goes out and buys panels, like a truck garage, you have 30 or 25, 30 panels and you're ready to go, call me. I mean, I will literally come over and talk you through it if you're uncomfortable. But I don't think you will. It's actually very simple to do, other than that stupid rapid shutdown problem. That's one thing that it really frustrates me that we have to do that, but I understand why we have to do it.
And getting the person that would give the stamp for the engineer.
Yeah, hey, I might have that in my email. I don't want to do it in the video, but
yeah, but I can send you my email.
Well, don't give it out here because I'm going to make this public.
Yes.
But I will give you mine because
Okay.
Mine is shanehamilton@gmail.com.
Okay. And then about the box, I know we discussed the box, the amp box. I actually have a generator hooked up for in case I lose power.
Okay.
And I have a transfer switch, which I know Ringwald was saying about cutting off the main, and I just had that done. But I do want the solar panels because I just want to, reduce and, cut down and stop with the Duke and kind of like use more solar energy.
Yeah. Now, when you have a system like that installed, I am not an electrician. I am not licensed at anything other than, like, say, in computer science. So that's where I'm hoping somebody else that we have an electrical engineer here, somebody that might have a little more knowledge about what that will do. Because what you have when you have AC coming in 240, they're running in a phase, right? And what an inverter will do is actually operate out of phase, and not out of phase, but it will operate at a different level than the power that's coming in. And somebody that's electrical engineer explained this a little bit better than me, but I know that this happens. But the inverter actually reads, hey, we got power. This is the sync. This is the synchronization that exists currently with that power coming in, and I need to cooperate with that. If you have an inverter added to that, now you have 3 different devices that are trying to figure that out.
Oh.
Matter of fact, putting 2 inverters in a home, they need to know about each other. So it's not good to mix 2 inverters in a house. 2 brands, get the same brand.
With her backup generator and the transfer switch, the panel essentially is going to think it's getting power from the city, your main 200 amp panel.
Okay.
And therefore your solar system is going to think that you're getting power from the city.
Yeah, but it switches. So your inverter is operating under this assumption that it's here, right? And then you lose power and the generator kicks in and it's somewhere else.
It's flowing through the same input to the
but it's a different frequency. It's a slightly different frequency.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, I agree with what you're saying there for sure. Yeah, I mean, you're getting a different source of power.
Right.
But I would think the solar system, there is no intelligence like you're talking about in the inverter in a transfer switch.
Okay.
Basically, is an AC. Is there power coming in or no?
Right.
It's a yes or no box.
Right.
So as far as it's concerned, no power is coming from the city. I'm putting out juice. Now
Right.
the inverter is going to say, I don't like the juice that's coming in now. Maybe I don't know. I'm not an expert on the inverter side.
And I'm not either. My RV actually has solar generator and AC, and it has a switch, and it interoperates together. But it was all as a system. And I'm just nervous because I'm not educated enough to say what that outcome would be.
I would just have to look at the specs of an inverter and see what it's expecting, for the intelligence to fire off. Is it expecting a certain range of voltage? What is it expecting? What's the intelligence using?
Well, the inverter will always keep a lower, let's see, is it a lower, higher voltage, slightly higher than your incoming power. So your inverter actually checks to see what the voltage is and always one-ups the power coming in from the grid so that it's always giving priority over all your devices.
Yeah, it's path of least resistance, basically.
Right, exactly.
Higher voltage is going to take priority.
But I also know it's not just the voltage, there's also a frequency thing that it's playing with. And I don't know enough about AC to know how
typical AC is 60 hertz. I don't know what a generator puts out. And when I say typical voltage, they say 220. Well, you might get 220, you might get 210, you might get 230, so it's it just depends on the circuit that you're running.
Well, I don't want to go into that because I'll sound stupid and I want to post this on the internet, right? But my understanding is each power source can't operate on the same exact frequency. So if you have two power sources, they have, and again, I'm not, I just know there was a problem with multiple inverters in the system because I actually put two inverters in, but they had to be of the same brand. And now I'm going to sound like an idiot if I go any further than that, and I just don't know. That's why Robert here, by the way, is the one that I would trust more than anything I say. You had the switch, Iris. Who installed your switch, your generator?
An engineer that I hired who I just had it done recently.
Okay, so you might still have his information.
Yes.
Okay, well, he would probably be a good person to I guess, ring maybe and get that detail and share with the rest of us, I guess.
Yes. Yeah, I agree with Shane. I mean, I'm an engineer, but I'm not an electrician, and there's two different types there. So Iris, you've got a unique situation. I wouldn't even tell you what to do with that. I would get a professional that's dealt with that.
Yeah, because now if I want to do the solar install, I don't know how that's going to work with that. So I'm going to try to get the same guy to come back and see. I haven't addressed it yet, but because I really would like to do this solar panels, and I have to do it on the roof.
Yeah, it's cheaper on the roof. And if you can do it for, like I said, I know you can do it for $1 a watt. You'll get a return on your investment in 5 years. And the cost of electricity going up, I looked it up, it goes up significantly. And our fuel source is really low right now. So expect our energy costs to go through the roof here shortly once fuel costs go up. So.
And Iris, you're going to have to do it right to get past the inspection anyway.
Exactly.
With all that stuff, you're going to have a professional put that system together, like Shane was saying, to make sure.
I know. I just got to find all this. I find who, because I don't know who's gonna. I got to locate. Find a professional to put it through for me.
And nobody wants to because. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, it just sounds like it. Shane was saying the best bet is to go with the person who knows your system and installed it.
Right.
Guarantee they're going to want to take your money, so they try to figure something out.
What's crazy is
I just want to make sure everything's done right, because I do have to pass, inspections and all that.
One of the things I found was, though, nobody wants to work with you if you're a do-it-yourselfer because installers make money from profit on the panels, the inverters, everything. So they don't want to go behind you and say, yeah, it's okay, even if it is. It's just not worth even $1,000 for them to do it because they just lost out on, we estimated that we saved my brother-in-law and I $20,000 for 2 days of work. by doing it ourselves.
Exactly.
Somebody wants that money, you know, so they just don't want to talk to you otherwise.
Exactly.
My experience, that's pretty typical with every trade out there. Plumbers, electricians, nobody wants to deal with a DIYer because you're right. They make their money the way they got to, which is marking
Yeah.
everything up, you know, and I don't blame them for that at all.
Oh, I love it. As a computer scientist, going in behind somebody, that's where I make most of my money. Somebody screws something up, they call me to fix it. So it's great. But yeah, I do agree with other industries. But anyways.
Well,
Okay,
guys, thanks for all this. I got to catch the recording for the rest of it, but I'll be in touch soon and appreciate all the input and putting this together.
no problem, John. Talk to you later.
All right, see ya.
Love your hat, for your penguin hat, or pelican hat.
Yeah, Shane, I think I've used enough of your time tonight.
Yes.
I really appreciate it as well. I could probably come up with 5,000 more questions, but I'll hold them for now. And I might give you a call, have you come over and take a look sometime and offer you a beer at least or something to.
Oh, hey, as soon as anybody wants to go for it, send me an email and I'll send you the link to shoot Jason's phone number at Santan and he'll hook you up
Yes.
with some panels.
I appreciate that, man. No, it's been great. What you're doing here is great. I really appreciate it.
No problem. By the way,
Yeah.
that's SN71, I think. I don't know, SN7, sorry.
Thank you so much.
Hey, no problem.
Have a
Bye,
good night,
everybody.
guys.
Good night.
Good night. Bye.
Thank you, Shane. Have a great evening.
You're welcome, Rachel.